I think the founders may have been well-fed and well-bred and all that, but I think they were also brilliant in offering us something that was worth pursuing generation after generation after generation. And you know, they had slavery, they had all those, you know, horrible contradictions to what we all feel is what our country is all about, but they also gave us the path to overcome those, and that's our Bill of Rights and our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and that's what really motivated Abraham Lincoln's "We the People," or government for the people, by the people, and of the people. It was about that promise of equality, and it's what, you know, kept him going through the Civil War. That this was, you know, no matter what it took, this was a promise we had to deliver on, and we've done it over and over and over again, often through constitutional amendments, which is what we're going to talk about. So that the country is very different than what it was. Women vote. You know, John knew Granny D, and will tell you a story about her, I think. But when she was born, women didn't vote, and senators weren't elected. They were appointed by the state legislatures, and in reaction to rampant corporate corruption there. There's a constitutional amendment to make senators be elected directly. We could not tax progressively. The Supreme Court had ruled that the income tax that Congress passed in the Progressive Era violated the Constitution. We did an amendment and overturned that and said we can, in fact, do that. Obviously, after the Civil War, the great amendments, including the 14th, that said, in fact, all people are equal. It actually did say all persons are equal, but the Supreme Court heard a case that women had brought to say, well, that means us too, right? And the court said no. So that's how we got the amendment that women could vote too. So, but all these things happened because of the founders and the vision of what this country was about, and they keep happening, and they're happening now. So I'm an optimist, actually, and I think you know, that America truly is the promise of the world, and we have a duty to fulfill it just as our grandparents did, and to make it real, and it's not just given to you. So, and the narrative is that we actually win a lot of the time, and the Supreme Court actually a lot of the time agrees with us. So, you know, you can pick cases where the founders or the Supreme Court said corporations have rights, but in my brief, and what I'd offer tonight, is there's many more where vigilance about corporations was mainstream American thinking, as I believe it is becoming again, that the founders, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, had grave concerns about corporations, and their corporations were nothing compared to what we have. But you know, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Thomas Jefferson's quote about somebody's got to help me on the quote now. Thank you. I'm glad John's here. But he was so concerned about corporations that he said we must crush in the birth the aristocracy of corporations that dare to challenge our government of the people. James Madison said corporations may be a necessary evil, but they have to be really guarded closely. That was repeated over and over again. The presidents of the United States, it was interesting, President Obama criticized the Citizens United case, and I'm glad he did, in the State of the Union. And you know, there's some controversy about that, and that was nothing compared to what presidents used to say about corporations. And you know, you can go back to Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, Grover Cleveland, Teddy Roosevelt, just over and over again. Many of the speeches that presidents would give to Congress in their annual addresses would always be saying, and we've got to get a handle on corporate power. It's threatening our politics. And that's how we got the 1907 Tillman Act, which banned corporate contributions in politics, and that was the root of the McCain-Feingold prohibition that got struck down. So I emphasize all of that to say that it's important that we not fall into the trap of looking at Citizens United as business as usual, 200 years of history, that the court always does this to us. Justice Stevens said in his dissent, Citizens United is a radical departure. That was a 90-year-old justice who's seen a lot. He said it's a radical departure from our First Amendment principles. And I think he's right. And there are people who will tell you, oh, it's not radical departure, it's the same old stuff. And that, I think, doesn't give us the sense of urgency that this is a radical change. Our democracy is very different now than it was 2 months ago, and we have to do something about it. And if we accept that it's not radical and it's the same old thing, then I think we feel like, well, maybe things will sort of be like they were and that it's not really so bad, so it'll be okay. Let me tell you then, if it's a radical departure, where did it come from? How did they do it? And I want to spend just a few minutes on that, and then I'll try to wrap up and say what we can do about it and turn it over to John. So I talked a little bit about the Citizens United group, and in my view, it was strategic litigation. It was very cleverly structured to make it a very hard case, and it is a hard case. It is a political movie. It is a nonprofit group. It is something that I think intuitively our first reaction is, whoa, we're censoring a movie and we're stopping a nonprofit group. And that was by design. There has been a 30-year effort to build corporate rights into the First Amendment, and it's something that for the first 200 years did not exist. It was very clear, and the court had actually decided in one of the many cases, which I would say are on our side, that properly separated commercial and political speech and corporate rights from people's rights. And until the late 1970s, the Supreme Court jurisprudence was there's no such thing as corporate speech that is protected under the First Amendment. Commercial speech was not protected. That changed, and it changed again by design. The Chamber of Commerce, and there was a corporate rights movement that has led to the Federalist Society. A lot of the conservative activism we're seeing on the Supreme Court today, that happened by a lot of effort over the last 30 years by a movement for corporate rights. Lewis Powell was a Chamber of Commerce attorney who wrote a memo outlining how we can use judicial activism to get corporate rights and defend corporations in the 1971. He sent that memo. President Nixon appointed him to the Supreme Court before President Nixon left office. And Justice Lewis Powell wrote the decision that I think Becky referred to, or maybe it was in Mary's talk, that in 1978 said the First National Bank of Boston and the Gillette Corporation had rights that were violated when we in Massachusetts said we didn't want corporate expenditures to be spent on citizen referenda. And that was the first time in American history, 202 years at that point, where corporate rights had been put into the First Amendment to invalidate a state law. A corporation is today what it's always been. It's a state-created entity. I mean, Representative Atkins and Senator Eldridge would pass laws that say how you can form a corporation if you want to. They don't have to pass those laws. We can all form a business. We can all form groups. We can form unions. We can form advocacy groups. We choose as a people to say, well, let's have corporations too, because we can create efficiencies. And they are very useful tools in the economy and elsewhere. But that's all they are tools created by us under statutes. And we've now lost the ability to control the tool that we've created and to draw the line, which we've always drawn before, between economic purposes where corporations are very effective and efficient, and remembering that there's a danger when that economic power is leveraged into political power. And that's where we find ourselves. So what John and I at Free Speech for People and many others, fortunately, are doing is to work on an amendment to the Constitution to change the Citizens United result and to fix the First Amendment, to get this notion of corporate speech and voices and disadvantaged persons out, unless we're actually talking about voices and speech and disadvantaged persons. And so that's what we're working on, and there's been a lot of encouraging developments. Senator Kerry and several other senators are working on an amendment effort in the Senate side. Congresswoman Edwards and the House Judiciary Committee chair have put an amendment bill into Congress, and it now has over 23 co-sponsors. And what you need, by the way, is 2/3 of Congress and to pass an amendment bill under Article 5 of the Constitution. It's how you amend the Constitution. 2/3 of Congress, and then 3/4 of the states need to ratify it. So we're working at the state level, and John will tell you more about that, where resolutions are coming out calling to send an amendment to the states for ratification. So there's a whole lot, if you believe what we're saying, and I hope you do, that this is not business as usual. This is a moment where Americans need to do what our parents and grandparents did and fix a serious problem. This is a moment, and there is opportunity here. There's so much to do to get resolutions passed, to support our state representatives and senators who are working on these efforts, and to work with Congress to get that 2/3 out. And I'm confident that we can do that, because this isn't about Republican or Democrat or independent, or, Citizens United is rejected by the American people. I mean, that's what the polling says. You have 85% of Democrats saying no, disagree. You have 81% of independents. And guess what? You have 76% of Republicans rejecting this decision. It is antithetical to the American people's notion of what we're about. And I'm confident it won't stand, but I'm confident it won't stand for even less time if we get working on an amendment. So John will tell you about that, and thank you very much.